Esther, an orphan girl favored by God. Long ago in the mighty kingdom of Persia, a young Jewish girl named Hadassah lived among her people. She was an orphan. Her parents had died when she was very young. Life had been hard, but she was not alone. Her older cousin Mordecai, a wise and kind man, took her in as his own daughter. Though she had suffered the pain of losing her parents, she grew up under Mordecai's care with a heart full of humility, grace, and faith in the God of Israel. Hadassah's people, the Jews, lived as foreigners in Persia. A royal summons, one day a great commotion spread through the kingdom. King Ahasuerus, the ruler of Persia, had banished his queen Vashti because she had disobeyed his command to appear before him. Now the king sought a new queen. Messengers were sent to gather the most beautiful young virgins from across the empire and bring them to the royal palace. Hadassah was one of those chosen. Mordecai, knowing the dangers that could come from revealing her Jewish identity, advised her to keep her heritage a secret. He also encouraged her to take the Persian name Esther so she would blend in. With a mixture of fear and uncertainty, she left her home and entered the king's palace, where she would be prepared for the possibility of becoming queen. Divine favor in the midst of strangers. The young women were placed under the care of Hegai, the custodian of the king's harem. Esther, though an orphan in a foreign land, found herself favored among all the women. God's hand was upon her, and wherever she went, she found grace. Hegai was immediately drawn to her beauty, but more than that, her humility and kindness distinguished her from the rest. He gave her the best beauty treatments, provided her with special food, and assigned her 7 attendants from the king's palace. She received the best of everything, not by her power, but because God was orchestrating her rise. When the time came for the young women to go before the king, each could take whatever adornments they desired to impress him. But Esther, unlike the others, did not rely on outward beauty alone. She sought guidance from Hegai, who knew what would please the king. Finally, she was presented before King Ahasuerus. The moment he saw her, his heart was captivated. Among all the young women, Esther stood out. She was not just beautiful, there was something divine about her presence. The king loved her above all others, and he placed the royal crown upon her head. An orphan girl, once without a home, was now queen of Persia. The rise of Haman and the threat to the Jews. Meanwhile, Mordecai, who often sat at the king's gate, discovered a terrible plot. 2 of the king's officers were planning to assassinate him. Mordecai quickly reported this to Esther, who informed the king in Mordecai's name. The plot was foiled, and the men were executed. Though this act of loyalty was recorded in the royal chronicles, Mordecai was not immediately rewarded. However, trouble was brewing. The king had a powerful official named Haman, a proud and wicked man. The king promoted him above all the other nobles and commanded that everyone bow before him. But Mordecai refused, for he would bow to no one but God alone. This enraged Haman, and when he discovered that Mordecai was a Jew, he plotted to destroy all the Jews in Persia. Haman convinced the king to issue a decree that on a certain day, all Jews, men, women, and children would be killed. The king, unaware of Esther's Jewish identity, agreed, and the decree was sealed with his ring. For such a time as this. When Mordecai heard of this terrible news, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and cried out in the streets. Esther, upon hearing of his distress, sent a messenger to ask what was wrong. Mordecai's response shook her to the core. He urged her to go before the king and plead for the lives of her people. But Esther was afraid. No one, not even the queen, could approach the king without being summoned. Anyone who did so could be executed unless the king extended his golden scepter. Mordecai's next words were both a challenge and a divine revelation. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows if you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther realized that her rise to queenship was not by accident. God had placed her there for a purpose. She made a bold decision. Go, gather all the Jews and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days. I and my attendants will do the same. Then I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. The enemy of the Jews was destroyed, and God's people were saved. The God who shows favor. Only God can lift a person from the ashes and place them among kings. Esther was an orphan, but God used her to save an entire nation. The same God who showed her favor is still at work today. He uses men as instruments of favor, just as he used King Ahasuerus to elevate Esther. He is merciful, turning evil plots into divine victories. When God is for you, no enemy can stand against you. So no matter your circumstances, trust that God is faithful. If he has placed you in a position, it is for a divine purpose. He will raise you, favor you, and fight for you, just as he did for Esther.